Today we have a very special guest talking with us, Apryl Boyle. She is a marine researcher, marine scientist, a shark specialist, and she is the founder of El Porter Shark from the University of South Carolina.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
I am an ambassador from the Marine Conservation Network in Santa Barbara. So I've gone to some places to see sharks. So in my field trip, I've seen black-tipped sharks in a water tunnel. So I really like marine biology, sharks, and everything else, but I'm most interested in deep-sea coral.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm in Sri Lanka. I'm 9 years old.
And you're doing so much already. That's really cool. That's exciting. I'm super proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing great. That's really cool. Sharks are super important. Deep sea coral is really neat. And I remember the first time I heard about that was when, because I always, a lot of people think of coral reef as something warm and in shallow water. And then there are sharks in both of those ecosystems, and they're very important to coral and all the different ocean ecosystems. There's a really good video out that I think Pew Trust put. I'll send you the link later, but it shows what happens when sharks are removed from a particular coral or other marine environment, and how if there's no sharks, then kind of the middle fish eat up everything, and then algae and seaweed and everything else just bloom out of control because the fish that ate them all got eaten by the middle guys that usually would have been eaten by the sharks. So everything's all thrown out of proportion.
Correct. So my first question is, what are sharks? Actually, what are sharks?
So a shark is a chondrichthyan fish, which is cartilaginous. So in cartilaginous fish, there are sharks, rays, and chimeras. And they don't have bones. They have, all their bones are made of cartilage, like your ear or the end of your nose, this material. So that's what their spine and all their bones are. So they're not the hard, like, our teeth are. Their teeth are very, very hard, though. That's the only thing in the fossil that remains. So in short, that is what a shark is. They're in the family of cartilaginous fish.
Elasmobranchi?
Yes, elasmobranchi, exactly. And they have different ways of reproducing, and some sharks look like rays and some rays look like sharks, and it's a very, very interesting and diverse group. There are over 400 to 500 species depending on who you ask.
Yeah. What is the difference between sharks and bony fish?
So that is a good question. So sharks, again, and bony fish, it's the cartilage that you're talking about. Also, sharks don't have a swim bladder like a bony fish. Bony fish have what's called a swim bladder that keeps their buoyancy, whereas sharks have fatty livers and oils in their livers. And they're aerodynamic, and their different fins is what keeps them buoyant. So they don't have that swim bladder. That's probably a really big difference between sharks and bony fish, and the cartilage. Those are the two big things that when you think of, that is pretty much universally true.
So their movement is also different from the shark's movement is different to the fish's movement, right?
And breathing and and how, so depending on the type of fish, like a bony fish in like the Ballastidae family with the spiky tail has what's called ballistid swimming, and then a shark has a different type of swimming, and then a ray swims a different way altogether. But the biggest difference, it's funny, like people don't always pay attention to how a shark swims in the water, and they'll see a dolphin and they'll see the fin and they'll think it's a shark, right? And a dolphin swims up and down because they have to breathe the air, right? Whereas a shark doesn't breathe air, and if it comes to the surface, it's still swimming side to side and not the up and down kind of way. So it's really funny when people think they've seen a shark, but it's actually a marine mammal, or even a big sea lion sometimes will look like a shark in the water if you've never seen one go by very quickly.
Yeah. So this is another question. So how do they use their electromagnetic sensors in their nose? Called like ampullae of Lorenzini?
Yeah, ampullae of Lorenzini. Very good. So those are gel-filled sacs in their nose that are very sensitive and can sense and feel what something is. So many times when people see sharks feeding, or a shark encounters them, a shark will bump them, and they're feeling what that is that food. They're using those electroreceptors or ampullae of Lorenzini in their noses to understand what is this being, or what is this thing in the way. Is this something I normally eat? Is this something I'm going to pass by? They also have, they also detect with their lateral lines, they detect electrical movement. So they're really very in tune to all the different movements in the ocean.
It goes from the tip of their nose to the end of their tail, right?
The lateral line is usually on the side of the animal, and it depends on the type of animal. So the lateral line, for example, bony fishes, you'll see the lateral lines. Some sharks you can actually see it in some animals. So it depends on the type of big one, small one, bony fish. But it's interesting, in schooling fishes, it's part of what keeps them, other than vision, what keeps them in sync with their movement. So that goes the same with schooling sharks. Like, leopard sharks, they follow the school by vision and by the movements of the lateral line.
And white tip reef sharks, they also go in groups.
Right, schooling sharks, yeah. White tip reef sharks, yeah.
So what is their life cycle?
So depending on the animal, so we'll talk about the big ones. Everybody, like the big predators, people think of sharks, they usually think of, great whites and bull sharks and things. So those take a long time to become reproductively mature, 9 or 10 years or so. And then even then, their gestation periods are usually very long, and they'll have maybe just a few young. So it's really important that we conserve the bigger predators, because their life cycle is such that they take a long time to get reproductively mature. They have long pregnancies, and then they don't produce a lot of young. So that's something that's really important to understand when people are thinking about culling or taking down a population, and they go for the larger animals. That shorter life, that life cycle, and that shorter period of where they're actually reproductively viable is a real problem.
Yeah. What is the evolution of sharks? How do they evolve to this new modern sharks?
That's a great question, because they really are essentially dinosaurs. There's a lot about them that hasn't changed. They've gotten smaller, 400 million years sharks have been around, and quite a long time ago there were megalodon, as you've heard of, that were much larger than any of our sharks today. Their teeth were as big as your hand, or, you know, whereas a white shark is like a shot glass size maybe. So you had these sharks that were much bigger, that were carnivores, where today we have 60-foot sharks, but 40 and 60-foot sharks, but they're whale sharks. And those are, you know, just filter feeders, not the big carnivorous like predator, even though, I mean, they're carnivores because they're eating little plankton animals, but, you know, they're not, a whale shark doesn't invoke the same scariness as a megalodon. And so sharks over time have gotten smaller, and part of that is because of the prey also has become smaller. One of the reasons that scientists believe that there are no more megalodon are because whale populations got smaller and fewer, and then smaller sharks came into existence and could outcompete these bigger sharks that needed more food. So that's kind of the life history and evolution of such. But there's several different, like I said before, there's 400 or 500 different species of sharks, depending on who you ask. And they fill little niches throughout the marine world. And it's really interesting how they've evolved to fit little areas.
Yeah, so even though the whale shark has teeth, it doesn't use them for eating. It only uses the teeth for mating purposes. They're like too small, we can't see them to be human.
Right, they filter their food.
So most of them give birth to live young, and some lay eggs live.
Yeah, it's called a mermaid's purse is what the little egg is. So yeah. So there's viviparous and ovoviviparous, and some of them are there's a few different ways, but yeah, like you said, some of them give birth to live, and others, like here where I am in Southern California, we have swell sharks that lay eggs that they're the same color as the giant kelp, and they have these little strings on them here, and the mothers will lay the eggs in the kelp and they blend in really well and they kind of stay in there. So, and then horn shark eggs kind of look like a corkscrew, and so the mother will lay them where kind of they're in a rocky area and they're protected in there. So those are kind of neat, and you'll see them washed up on the beach at times. And so yeah, that's some of those are, I have a mermaid's purse somewhere over here.
What is the difference between reef sharks and oceanic sharks?
Really where they live and what they eat. So reef sharks that are usually reef sharks, I've seen like black tip and white tips and little lemon sharks. They're a lot smaller, whereas the oceanic sharks are bigger, more solitary predators. But, you know, like a white shark, for example, you don't really find them in big groups or anything unless there's a mating event, or like, you know, at Guadalupe Island, you'll see a few males together, but then the females, you know, by herself until they're mating. But yeah, so really the differences in what they eat and where they live, and there's some size differences really. And reef sharks, there are more reef sharks that are schooling than there are oceanic.
Yeah, so I think the oceanic sharks are a bit more faster than the reef sharks.
Oh yeah,
so
definitely like makos and whites, and yeah, tigers, they definitely move faster.
Yeah. So the oceanic sharks have to look for prey. So the reef sharks don't have to look for prey because it's a whole reef full of fish and other things.
Yeah, it's a little different ecosystem balance there for sure. Whereas an oceanic, so like a great white, for example, here they go, you know, they'll come here to Southern California, they'll go down to Guadalupe Island, and then maybe out to Hawaii, and then up to San Francisco area, and they kind of come around here in the Pacific. And, you know, we're trying to figure out what exactly they're doing, but they're looking, you know, obviously looking for prey, they're looking for mating, but we know places that they do eat, like for example, Guadalupe Island is one of the places they eat. Surf Beach here in Central California is another place where there are a lot of seals, sea lions, where they come to eat. La Jolla Cove down in San Diego, same place. So they'll come in to eat some of these bigger oceanic predators. They go to these island spots or these places along the coast where they will find these mating events where there's the elephant seals or the sea lions or other different types of seals where they have a particular mating ground and where they're pupping and all this other, you know, usual stuff. There's a lot of females sitting around, bulls fighting and stuff. It's an easy spot for the oceanic sharks to come in and get some food.
Yeah, so I heard that great white sharks stay mostly at Seal Island. So more great white sharks are found there than in different places, right?
Were they're found where?
In Seal Island in the southern tip of Africa.
Oh yeah, you can definitely find, yeah. Southern tip of Africa is one of the hot spots, as well as there's spots in Western Australia, in Mexico, and off the coast of California. There's certain spots where, yeah, they're definitely white sharks definitely live there because there are lots of seals and or sea lions.
Are sharks actually cancer immunity? Because Chinese people, like some people believe that sharks are cancer immunity, but I think they're not.
A really good, yeah, I think that's a great question. I think they're not also. It's something that people thought for a while, as you said, for Eastern medicine, I think is what started that. And I think they have found, in fact, I read something quite contrary where that sharks did develop cancer. So having a shark additive in your own diet certainly wasn't going to prevent it, which we know that because shark products have a lot of mercury. So they're really toxic to, you know, ingest any kind of shark because the bigger sharks accumulate the toxin bioaccumulation and whatnot. So yeah, wow, that just went on a fun tangent, but you know what I mean.
So what are the diets of sharks? So for example, I know a few diets of sharks like seals, dolphins, fish, tuna, I don't know.
Yeah. So here, the smaller sharks, okay. So on the coast of Southern California here in the Los Angeles area, the Santa Monica Bay, we have a lot of little stingrays and little sharks that come in and feed on little schools of fish up in the shore. So we have these little anchovy and different types of schooling bait fish, we call them. And the smaller sharks and rays will come in to eat those. Then the bigger sharks, the baby white sharks, the young of the year who are, you know, 4 or 5 feet long, they will come in. They like to eat the stingrays and the smaller sharks. And as they get bigger, they like to eat the really oily stuff like mackerel and tuna and whatnot. And then, of course, their favorite are seals, sea lions, and other marine mammals.
There are many newspapers and stuff in social media that great white sharks are human killers, but that's actually not true, isn't it? But there were some reported deaths and attacks.
Yeah, it's not true. It's definitely something that there's a problem with communication, and that's one of the things that I work on is shark PR and communicating the science and the facts to people, because you're familiar with the global shark attack or international shark attack file. There are instances in that file that are called attacks where there were no human and shark contact, where a shark made contact either stealing fish off of a kayak, bumping into a boat. Sometimes just a regular sighting will wave the attack flag depending on who you talk to. So that's one challenge that we have. Another challenge is that it's so exciting. Oh my gosh, scary sharks and movies and pop culture and yay. So people have fears that they believe are very real because there's this tiny little chance they might see a shark in the water. They have a better chance of winning the lottery or something, right? Or, you know, finding $10 on the ground or anything really. They've got a far better chance. But just because we're so uncomfortable in water, right? So humans, we live, you know, we live here on the land, right? We're breathing air, and our bodies aren't made for the water to live in 24 hours a day. Well, we cannot, I was like, I was going on this big story and I'm like, now where was I going? But so we live on the land, sharks live in the water. They're adapted to that certain way, whereas we're adapted here. So because we aren't familiar, it's that much scarier for us, right? That adds to why people think it's so rational, because we can't breathe underwater, we can't see or hear well underwater. So it makes us that much more unfamiliar, which makes us believe that sharks are more dangerous because it's such an unfamiliar environment.
Why are sharks really important to their ecosystem?
So, as I was saying, there's this great video that I'll send you the link to, but they regulate the ecosystem in a number of ways. They, you know, make sure that the prey populations don't go out of control, get rid of the sick and dying animals, and they keep the, you know, the trophic cascading in the right balance, because without them, you have overgrowth of something or another. And the problem with that is something like here in the United States, there's a park called Yellowstone where they removed the top predators of which were wolves, and the land became unstable because elk populations had eaten so much of the ground that it became unstable. And they started reintroducing the wolf, and then the land started becoming more stable. The populations became much better, and the whole ecosystem is starting to recover. Now, you can't do that with sharks. That's why it's so much more important. Great white sharks, for example, once they're gone, they're gone. They don't live in captivity. So we can't put them in a zoo or an aquarium and then, you know, expect to repopulate. And we can't move them from one part of the world to another. So it's really critically important that we keep them and their population, and especially the big ones. Did you know big sharks and big whales also help the ocean in that additional piece of sequestering carbon, where a giant animal, when it passes away and it sinks to the bottom, all that carbon stays in the ocean. When you start taking out the giant whales and whale sharks and the big sharks and releasing all that sequestered carbon, it's less that the ocean could have been fixing and keeping out of the atmosphere. So sharks are really ecologically important for a couple things. Most importantly, the trophic regulations.
Yeah, so mostly people think killing a shark is a great thing, but it's not a great thing. Definitely not a great thing. So shark deaths are a little popular in some islands. So that's because of the downflow, the flooding of rivers. So all of that dirt, algae, and stuff attract sharks, prey, and sharks. So when the humans get inside the water, the sharks think they're gonna get their meal, so they attack. So people die from shark attacks because of people.
Right. So there's a number of things you're touching on there. There are human-made reasons why sharks are where they shouldn't be. That's what you're talking about. You're exactly right. It's humans caused why the sharks are there. And then there's also times where people directly are trying to do something like catching a shark they're not supposed to be, or messing with it and touching it and actually getting hurt in something called a provoked attack. So but that's less common than what you're talking about, where we've got, since climate, the temperatures are changing, so there's species redistribution. So you have sharks in a different area than they were before. I know I was reading, somebody wrote a story about growing up on Reunion Island, where there were always sharks on one side of the island, but not the other side. And now apparently there are sharks on that other side of the island. And because they're thinking that species redistribution, because of climate, because of pollution, because of rain, because of a number of things are going on there, and all because of humans is the bottom line.
Yeah. How could we protect these amazing sharks?
So there's a few things. First of all, it would be great if we stopped eating everything in the ocean, because we're eating the ocean like crazy. But not everybody wants to be a vegan, so that's okay. Everybody can do things, little things in their lives, like have meatless Mondays, where you just have a plant-based diet. You help not just sharks, but the whole ocean. And a plant-based, like meatless Mondays, is not only good for the environment, it's better for your health, and it's less expensive. So it helps you save money. Also, plastics. So I have my beat up water bottle here, but single-use plastic is choking the ocean. It's choking everything from plankton to whale sharks to giant whales in our oceans. So stop the use of single-use plastic, and really think about how you use and what you use. Packaging on food, for example, is now the most picked up thing on beach cleanups. It just passed cigarette butts as the thing or most picked up. So stop using so much plastic in our lives. Will not help just sharks, but the whole ocean. So they're all connected. So really those two tips are things that anybody can do at any time with, and it doesn't cost anything.
So every time my father and me go to a shop or something, I always tell him to bring him a cotton bag instead of offering getting the plastic bags the shopkeeper gives. So
yes.
So I don't even like eating fish. So, goblin sharks. So I don't know actually why do goblin sharks have this long snouty thing?
I don't know a lot about the goblin sharks either. It's funny because I work with an illustrator because we're putting out a book, and he just sent me a really cool illustration he did of a goblin shark. And I meant to look up some really good stats for it so I could post about it tomorrow, but I have never studied them. I just think they're really cool looking.
Yeah, so I heard that their name has come from the mythical Chinese demon called the Tengu. Because of its long snout, it's got the name. So actually, these guys can put their jaws out of their mouth like in some sort of alien creature to grab their prey.
Right, like the movie Alien.
Yeah, they don't need a second jaw in their throat like eels. So they actually put this whole jaw out of their mouth. It's really impressive, I think.
I think so. I think I saw an animation about that on a TV show once. That's really neat.
So I think deep sea sharks have 7 or 6 gills. Like the field shark.
5 gills, yeah. Yeah, the deeper, yeah, you'll see deeper, you'll see more gills on deeper sharks, like the 7 gill, and Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? That's got to be an adaptation to try to get more oxygen going through, right? Because if you think about it, there's like, it's less oxygen, there's more pressure, it's colder temperature as you go down. So need more room and more space and everything to get more oxygen.
Yeah, and so thresher sharks too are deep sea shark, but they come up to the surface to have a clean up from rust or something.
Yeah, we have a lot of thresher sharks here in Southern California, and they have that really long tail that's really long, and they use it to stun their prey. They can like use it like a whip.
Yeah. So I have this really, really funny question. So I've heard that sharks are scared of dolphins. Is that true or what?
People have said that. Now, I think it's just pop culture stories, but because I've never seen evidence of a shark being afraid of a dolphin, unless that dolphin's an orca. An orca is the biggest dolphin, right? Killer whale is actually a dolphin. So I'm pretty sure white sharks are a little, if I was, I'd be a little frightened of the orca because they are very intense, very smart predators that fight in groups and hunt in groups. And they've been known to surgically remove parts of white sharks and hunt white sharks. So they are a very scary top predator. So if that's the dolphin they're talking about, then I believe it. But if it's like the Atlantic or Pacific bottlenose, like that we're all thinking of, the cute, lovable little flipper, probably not.
Yeah, but actually they attack dolphins. Dolphin pods attack sharks. So they come from the underside and the shark is like this and they hit the belly. So they don't. So then the shark feels immense pain and then swims away. So they do this to protect their young or protect the pod.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely protect themselves. And it's funny though, because people think that if they see a dolphin that they're safe from sharks, but the dolphin will protect themselves and their young and not necessarily protect humans, even though people have stories where they swear the dolphins kept the sharks away and stuff. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So the shark skin is not full of scales like other fish, even though we see it like silky and smooth. But it's really scaly, and some divers have been even scratched by rubbing on a shark, like because of their dermal genitals or whatever. So what are
Right,
they
dermal. It's like armor, the dermal denticles. It's like armor for them. So it's like sand, it'll feel more sandpapery, but it protects them and it keeps them aerodynamic. It does a lot of things for them, but basically it keeps them from getting hurt. So it protects their skin. It's like a little armor. Have you seen it on have you looked at a microscope? It looks like little teeth. It's really cool.
Yeah, I've read in books too. And I've heard that the dermal denticles help them to swim fast and quiet. So here's the shark encyclopedia.
Yes. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, that's what I was saying. The denticles keep them aerodynamic, and it's that's so cool. Oh my gosh.
They don't even carry this thing.
No, it's like, does that weigh as much as you do? That's a big book.
Yeah, that's a big book. So my favorite type of shark is the hammerhead. Not the hammerhead and the whale shark.
Very cool.
The
My
whale shark is
favorite is I love the great white shark. That's my favorite always.
okay. My favorite is a whale shark, as I said before, and I like it because it feeds on plankton. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that there are some freshwater sharks like pond and sharks that are found in Sri Lanka here. So they're rare species of sharks. So do you know some?
I've read like a couple papers on them, but I don't know a lot about those. I'm really interested about it, but I do know that, like, for example, bull sharks here in the United States are often found in nearly fresh water, very, like, at least brackish, but they can osmoregulate a certain ways so they can go into almost fresh water for quite some time. But I've only heard of those that you have in Sri Lanka. I've not studied much about them.
Yeah, the pond and cherry is a long extinct shark, but they found a specimen here in Sri Lanka. So it's really amazing. Sri Lanka is a place filled with whale sharks and other types of sharks, black tips. So I have actually seen the an eagle ray going through the water tunnel above me. So it was really cool. So in a feeding event. So it's in an aquarium. So it went above me through in a water tunnel, and I saw his mouth and the gills. So the real difference about rays and sharks are the rays breathe through spiracles and holes, and even the swordfish with the long snout and the spikes over here, and they also have spiracles, and their gills are on the underside.
Yeah.
That's really
it's funny when you look in the sand. I've taken care of rays before, and people are like, well, how many rays are in there? And I'm like, well, go ahead and look. And you have to really look, and then you just see these two little spiracles like making motion in the top, and that's the only way you can see that there's a ray there. And it's funny when you see them underneath, they look like this weird little smiling thing, right? They look like a little alien stuck in ravioli, don't they?
Yeah, like a curve with another curve on top.
Yeah, it's
like
cute.
a W with the it kind of looks like a W with a curve in the middle.
Yeah.
So the next really time, let's talk about rays and skates and commuters.
Rays and skates are, I have helped clicker train. It's called rays. So I used to take care of some rays. And if you've ever, people have with their dogs, when your dog does something good, you push the clicker. So when it hears it, it gets rewarded. And then it'll want to do that behavior. And that's something animal behaviorists use a lot when they're for animal husbandry, for their care and feeding and, their medical care. So I have done that with rays, with cow nose rays in the past, helped to clicker train them so that we could give them better medical examinations and feedings and whatnot. So that just, when you said rays again, it made me think of that. But rays are really interesting. Really, they have a lot of personality, and some are in, a lot of times they're in schools, and you'll see them by themselves a lot. But in Florida, it's very interesting. I've seen whole schools of cow nose rays and jumping out of the water, and it's really neat.
Your commuters are in deep waters and are nearly threatened because of overfishing of them.
I saw that you're wearing a Star Wars shirt, and I was like, that's really cool. Because if I wasn't a marine scientist, I would be an astrophysicist. I love space stuff. In fact, I've been watching Star Trek all day.
Yeah.
So
When I was little too, I was interested in space. Then I was interested because I thought when there's millions and thousands of creatures unknown in Earth, in the oceans, why should we go looking for aliens in space? So I thought about that.
yeah.
Then I moved on to marine science.
Right on. That's really cool.
Yeah. So,
well, is that all of your questions?
yeah, that's all my questions.
Okay, sweetie. Well, this has been really fun. We'll do it again, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm going to get, yeah, thank you. Okay, it was great. It was really nice talking to you. I'll see you later.
Yeah.